Good morning, Mr. Torres.
No duct tape. Stand your ground. No retreat.
Sir,
Make my bond and chill you.
I'm going to ask that you be quiet.
I'm just making a request. You make it $1 million, I'm paying that, and I'm getting out.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Thank you. They will ask for a $5 million bond in this case.
Make that
Because
shit
of
$5
the
billion.
defendant's-
$5
the
billion.
statements in the court.
That's disrespectful.
And the threats to the prosecutor.
I made promises.
Those promises were also made in previous cases. The defendant was served 3 years for 2 cases: intimidation, killed his 26-year-old sister.
She stole my car.
The defendant shot her once. She went to the ground, and the defendant went to where she was, shot her twice as she laid on the ground.
Who gives a shit? She ain't never bought me nothing. She stole my car. Told her to give it back. Oh, they shot at me
Sir.
too. Stand your ground. No retreat.
In the early morning hours of October 23, 2019, 26-year-old Willita Antoinette Hill, a devoted mother of 3 and a beloved daughter known by many as Nita, made what seemed like a simple, harmless decision. Alongside her boyfriend, she took her brother's car without asking. It was an act that probably felt trivial in the moment, but it would spark a chain of events so tragic, it would shake an entire family and leave a community in mourning. Just hours later, the quiet of Cleveland's Buckeye Woodhill neighborhood was shattered by the sound of gunfire. When police arrived near East 109th and Mount Carmel Road, they discovered a heartbreaking scene. Willita lying lifeless on the pavement, riddled with bullets. Unresponsive. Gone. As investigators dug deeper, the horror only grew darker. The trigger had been pulled not by a stranger, but by her own brother Antonio Swanson. He had fled the scene on a bicycle, only to be captured by U.S. Marshals 5 days later. The motive? A deadly rage sparked over something as petty as a borrowed car. Willita's life was remembered with love. She worked at Amazon, raised 3 beautiful children, and was cherished by her parents, Renita Hill and William Martin, along with her many siblings. Today, her name is etched into the National Gun Violence Memorial, surrounded by candles and grief-stricken tributes. What could drive a brother to kill his own sister over something so small? And was there more to this story than what was ever revealed? This story takes us to Cleveland, Ohio, a city known for its industrial roots, vibrant art scene, and passionate sports culture. But beyond the murals and stadium lights, Cleveland hides a darker reality. Its violent crime rate is approximately 233% higher than the national average. That chilling statistic would come to life in the tragic events that ultimately claimed Willita Antoinette Hill's life. Born on August 13, 1993, to Renita Hill and William Martin. She grew up in a large, blended family, 4 siblings on her father's side, 5 on her mother's. And while the bond between siblings was undeniably strong, the family dynamic itself was far from simple. Willita was raised by both parents, giving her a certain stability, a sharp contrast to the lives of her half-siblings, many of whom were raised in homes described as unstable and troubled. That contrast shaped her. It made her grateful, grounded, and fiercely loyal. In a world where love wasn't always consistent, Willita held tightly to what she had. She learned compassion, strength, and resilience, qualities that became the core of who she was and left a lasting impression on everyone she met. But under that warmth and connection, a painful truth lingered, because the same family that gave her strength would one day become the source of her deepest pain. Before her life took its darkest turn, Willita was focused on building something meaningful. On July 3, 2011, she proudly graduated from East Detroit High School, stepping out into the world with quiet determination. She had no way of knowing that the very strength that carried her forward would be pushed to the ultimate test. Driven and independent, she dove into the workforce, landing jobs at Target and Walmart Supercenter. There, her energy, smile, and genuine care for people didn't go unnoticed. Whether it was a coworker or a customer, Willita had a gift. She made people feel seen, heard, and important. It was a rare light, and one that tragically would soon be missed. As she grew more confident in her future, love entered the picture. Willita fell for a man whose identity remains undisclosed. Like many young romances, theirs started with laughter and dreams. And on November 3, 2013, those dreams took shape in the form of their first child. Born prematurely at 7.5 months, the baby was fragile, but Willita wasn't. She poured every ounce of herself into being a mother. Her love was fierce, unconditional, and unwavering. But that same fierce loyalty, so beautiful in motherhood, would later blind her to danger hidden in plain sight. Motherhood lit a fire in Willita. And just a few years later, on February 6, 2016, she welcomed a second child, a beautiful baby girl. But the joy was soon clouded by heartbreak. The man she once called a partner, Roro, began to drift. He became emotionally withdrawn, then physically absent. Faced with the crushing weight of parenting alone, Willita turned to the only outlet she had, social media. There she poured out her pain, her frustration, and her fears. She became the voice of so many single mothers, left holding everything with no one holding them. Post after post, Willita took to social media calling him out, not just for leaving her but for turning his back on the children he had helped bring into the world. Her pain was raw, her disappointment undeniable. Eventually their relationship came to an end. But that heartbreak didn't stop Willita from focusing on what mattered most, her children. Her love for them never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger. She was more determined than ever to give them the life she believed they deserved. Then, in 2017, a flicker of light returned to her world. She met someone new, a man who offered her stability, gentleness, and a shared vision for the future. For the first time in a long while, Willita felt something close to peace. But, as she would soon discover, peace can be heartbreakingly short-lived. Though his name remains unknown to the public, their bond deepened quickly. On June 21, 2017, Willita gave birth to her third child. And this time things felt truly different. She finally had a partner who didn't run, someone who stood beside her and embraced the role of father with pride. Willita often shared glimpses of their happiness on social media, posts filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Her children were her entire universe, the very rhythm of her life. Everything she did, every decision she made was for them. And if you asked anyone who knew her, they'd all say the same thing. Willita was a mother first and always. There was nothing she wouldn't do for her kids. But while Willita was pouring herself into motherhood and trying to create a life of joy and safety, trouble was already brewing, danger hiding in plain sight, closer than she ever imagined. That threat came from within her own bloodline, her 32-year-old half-brother Antonio Swanson. To outsiders, Antonio was just another relative. But to those who truly knew him, he was a storm always ready to strike. His presence brought unease, a quiet tension that never seemed to leave the room when he was in it. And for good reason. Antonio carried with him a long and troubling past. His record was marred by a string of offenses from theft to domestic violence. He had spent years moving in and out of prison, each return more troubling than the last. But his violent tendencies weren't limited to legal documents. They were broadcasted across his social media platforms for the world to see. Online, Antonio crafted a persona that was equal parts threatening and unhinged. In video after video, he appeared armed and aggressive, using hateful language and issuing open threats to anyone he felt had disrespected him.
You already know who the fuck it is, man. Yeah, yo on deck, man. Be hollering out this bitch. Get they dumb ass bus real quick. Stay with the fire on me, you already know. My clip holds 16. I got bullets for you niggas that be hollering talking. Stop it.
He wasn't just dangerous, he wanted people to know it. And behind all that chaos, a chilling question began to rise. How long before that storm hit home? What no one could have expected was how the threats Antonio once shared online would foreshadow a tragedy that would hit devastatingly close to home. His very own sister. Yet not all of his posts were aggressive. Some hinted at something deeper, a silent pain festering beneath the surface. In one post, Antonio wrote about growing up in a home without parents. In another, he shared a screenshot lamenting how no one remembered his birthday. These weren't excuses for his behavior, but they did reveal a man wrestling with abandonment, neglect, and emotional wounds he never healed from. Despite his troubling behavior, Willita always tried to keep the peace. That was just who she was. She believed in people, believed they could change, even when they gave her every reason not to. Antonio was family, and for Willita that meant something. No matter how tense things got, she still gave him the benefit of the doubt. But that compassion, that loyalty, would come at a heartbreaking cost. On the afternoon of October 13, 2019, something unimaginable happened. The day started like any other. Willita went about her usual routine, taking care of her kids, running errands, handling life one task at a time. At some point during the day, she made a decision that would set everything in motion. Without asking, she took the keys to Antonio's silver Pontiac Grand Prix and had her boyfriend drive it while they completed their errands. A small action, one that probably felt harmless in the moment. But to Antonio it lit a fuse. Not long after, Willita and her boyfriend returned to the area near East 109th Street and Mount Carmel Road in Cleveland, Ohio. They had no idea what was waiting for them. As they pulled up, they were immediately met by a furious Antonio. Words were exchanged, voices raised, and the situation escalated rapidly. The argument spiraled out of control, and then, without warning, Antonio pulled out a gun. He shot at Willita. She collapsed, hit by the first bullet, but that wasn't enough for him. As she lay helpless on the pavement, Antonio walked up and, without a shred of hesitation, fired 2 more shots into her body. Cold. Remorseless. Right there, in a neighborhood she once called home, Willita's life was stolen, by her own brother. But Antonio's rage wasn't finished. Just seconds after killing his sister, more gunfire rang out, this time between Antonio and Willita's boyfriend. Bullets flew in every direction, terror rippling through the streets. Then in the chaos, Antonio fled the scene, on a bicycle, vanishing before anyone could stop him. Panicked neighbors who had witnessed the horrific violence called 911, fearing that the nightmare wasn't over. But by the time Cleveland police arrived, it was already too late. Willita was dead and her killer was gone. What followed was a suffocating silence. A quiet that echoed the cruelty of one man's choice. Her family was shattered, left trying to comprehend a pain that words couldn't contain. But that silence wouldn't last long. Within hours, news of the tragedy exploded across Cleveland. Headlines screamed, "Woman murdered by her own brother." The Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force launched a manhunt alongside Cleveland police. Authorities issued warnings to the public. Antonio Swanson was armed, dangerous, and walked with a distinct limp. They believed he was hiding in the Buckeye Shaker neighborhood. The U.S. Marshals reminded the public, anyone caught helping him, even family, could face criminal charges. But Antonio couldn't hide forever. 5 days after the murder, on October 28, 2019, authorities found him holed up inside a home on Crestwood Avenue, not far from East 110th Street. He was arrested without incident and taken into custody. But justice would be far from swift. What came next was a long and emotionally exhausting legal process, filled with twists and revelations no one was prepared for. That same day, Antonio was brought before a judge at Cleveland Municipal Court for his bond hearing. But rather than remorse, he showed something else, something darker. Antonio's behavior during that hearing was deeply unsettling. He was combative, erratic, and alarmingly disconnected from the weight of his actions. As the prosecutor calmly requested a $5 million bond, Antonio interrupted, mocking the request out loud, showing zero regard for the severity of his crime.
My understanding is that he is demanding, so the date will be November 7th.
November
Now,
7th?
The state will ask for a $5 million bond in this case. Not
Ain't
only
that
because
shit
of the
5
defendant's-
billion?
The
5
defendant's
billion.
statements in the court.
That's disrespectful.
The courtroom could feel it. There was something deeply wrong. What should have been a solemn moment of accountability became instead a display of arrogance and defiance. And for the family of Willita Hill, it was just the beginning of a long road to justice. During his court appearance, Antonio's behavior grew increasingly erratic and unsettling. He kept interrupting the proceedings, making strange hand gestures, and rambling incoherently with bizarre, nonsensical statements. It was clear to everyone in the room that he was either completely disconnected from reality, or simply didn't care. What stood out the most, though, was what he didn't do.
Is Mr. Torres? Oh, good morning, Mr. Torres.
No duct tape. Stand your ground. No retreat.
Sir,
Make my bond a trillion.
I'm going to ask that you be quiet.
I'm just making a request. You make it $1 million, I'm paying that, and I'm getting out.
Thank you. Mr. Torres?
Thank you, Your Honor. My understanding is that he is demanding, so the date will be November 7th.
November
Now,
7th?
Not only he killed his 26-year-old
Who gives a shit?
sister.
She stole my car.
The defendant shot her once, she went to the ground, and the defendant went to where she was, shot her twice as she laid on the ground, and that was done in front of her father.
Who gives a shit? She ain't never bought me nothing. She stole my car. Told her to give it back. Oh, they shot at me
Sir.
too. Stand your ground. No retreat.
He showed absolutely no sign of remorse. Not a flicker of regret for the sister he had just murdered. Then came a revelation that made the situation even more disturbing. Prosecutors informed the court that just 4 months before killing Willita, Antonio had completed a 3-year prison sentence. His conviction? Attempted intimidation and menacing by stalking a 17-year-old girl in Cleveland Heights. But it didn't stop there. According to chilling reports, while Antonio was serving time for that crime, he allegedly made a horrifying statement. He said he should have killed her, referring to the teenage girl he had stalked.
In regards to the bond and the threats to the prosecutor,
I made promises.
those promises were also made in previous cases. The defendant was served 3 years for 2 cases, intimidation, attempted intimidation and menacing by stalking. The menacing by stalking, for which he finished serving his sentence last June, related to the defendant stalking a 17-year-old student in Cleveland Heights. There is a report in that case where the defendant allegedly stated that in jail that he should have killed her, served his time, and now he's here because of this new case.
So when the court brought up the murder of his sister, hoping for some sliver of human emotion or acknowledgement of the pain he had caused, Antonio responded with nothing but cold indifference. No sorrow, no shame, just a haunting void that left everyone wondering, was there ever any line he wouldn't cross? As the prosecutor began laying out the gruesome details of what happened the day Willita Hill was murdered, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. But it was Antonio Swanson's reaction that truly sent chills through everyone present. His response wasn't just cold, it revealed something far darker. It became increasingly clear that this wasn't just a man driven by rage or entitlement. Antonio appeared to be deeply disturbed. His behavior throughout the hearing was erratic and unsettling. He showed no sign of remorse, and his bizarre, disconnected demeanor raised serious concerns about his mental state. The court couldn't ignore what was unfolding in front of them. Antonio wasn't just dangerous, he seemed completely untethered from reality. Recognizing the threat he posed, the judge made a bold move. Originally set at $5 million, Antonio's bond was raised to a staggering $15 million.
Mr. Swanson?
They shouldn't have changed the law.
Detective Cook, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Prosecutor Torres has stated?
No, I think you
Stand your
covered it
ground.
pretty accurately.
And stand your ground.
Actually, sir, based on your request, this bond's going to be $15 million.
No,
Cash
billion.
or surety.
Make me look good.
And just before the hearing ended, his final words were chilling, rambling and ominous, offering a disturbing preview of the continued chaos he would bring to the courtroom in the months ahead. On November 8, 2019, a Cuyahoga County grand jury handed down a sweeping indictment against Antonio Swanson. The charges included multiple counts of aggravated murder, attempted murder, felonious assault, and weapons offenses, each one a reflection of the terrifying violence he had unleashed. But the horror didn't stop with the murder of his sister. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered something even more shocking. After fleeing the scene of Willita's killing, Antonio hadn't simply disappeared. He'd continued his violent rampage. Authorities say he attempted to kill both his own father and another civilian in the days that followed, a chilling escalation that underscored just how far gone he truly was. Then, on November 18, 2019, Antonio returned to court for his formal arraignment. But to the disbelief of many, the judge lowered his bond to $2 million. Despite the brutal nature of the crime, his violent past, and his disturbing courtroom behavior, the decision sparked outrage and fear in the community. How could someone so clearly dangerous be given a chance, however small, at freedom? From there, the case began to stall. Legal motions, delays, and repeated psychological evaluations stretched the process into a slow-moving ordeal. Months turned into years. Antonio remained behind bars as both the prosecution and defense prepared for a long, difficult trial. But in a surprising turn of events, nearly 2 years after Willita's death, Antonio Swanson pleaded guilty in September 2021. Just like that, the court proceedings that had dragged on for so long came to an abrupt end. For many, the sudden plea was jarring. After so much time, so many outbursts, and so many unanswered questions, it was over. But for Willita's family, nothing about it felt like closure. The pain didn't vanish when the gavel fell. They're left now with the unbearable reality of her absence, mourning a vibrant, loving mother whose life was stolen in the most senseless and violent way imaginable. Willita Hill's death is a tragedy they'll carry forever, one that continues to echo through every courtroom appearance, every memory, and every unanswered question. What makes this tragedy even harder to accept is that the person responsible for Willita Hill's death wasn't a stranger or an outsider. It was someone from her own family. her own brother. The betrayal cuts deeper because it came from within, from someone who shared her blood. That kind of pain doesn't just break hearts, it shatters them. But perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of all has been felt by the ones she loved the most, her children. 3 innocent lives have been permanently altered. These young children are now forced to grow up without their mother's embrace, her guidance, or the everyday love that only a mother can give. No one can truly fill that void no matter how much family and friends try. A mother's love is irreplaceable, and the absence of Willita will echo through every birthday, every school event, and every milestone in their lives. They are the real victims of this senseless crime. Not only did they lose their mother, but they also lost the sense of safety and stability she worked so hard to give them. Willita's murder is not just another tragic headline.
This is his sister on his father's side, and again, he's been sick for a long time. She states that she just wants for her family to grieve in peace, and I just couldn't imagine what she's going through. Her exact words were, "There are no words to describe a mother's loss. I can't believe that this happened."
It's a stark reminder of what can happen when mental health struggles and unresolved trauma are ignored or brushed aside. Antonio Swanson wasn't just a violent criminal. He was a deeply troubled individual showing clear signs of instability long before this tragedy happened. His actions were monstrous, but they were also part of a larger failure. A system that too often overlooks the early warning signs in people who desperately need help. This case forces us to confront difficult truths, not just about family violence and loss, but about how society handles mental illness, especially among those with a history of violence. It's a painful example of what can happen when intervention comes too late. Now, Willita's story stands as both a tragedy and a warning. Her family, especially her children, will carry the weight of this loss for the rest of their lives. And while justice may have been served in court, no sentence can undo the damage that's been done. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Truth in Crimes. We appreciate you taking the time to reflect on such a difficult and important case. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments because your voice matters. Our mission is to bring you accurate, well-researched, and emotionally compelling stories, all grounded in truth. Until next time, stay safe, take care of one another, and stay tuned for another gripping case coming soon.